Hello and welcome to this training on looking for skew in historical data. Why is looking for skew in historical data important? It's important because it allows districts to understand what systems they currently have in place. It gives districts insight on how current systems are operating, and it gives districts the ability to establish weights and performance standards for their teacher incentive allotment local designation system application. Establishing weights and performance standards will assist a district in determining designations. In this recording, districts will begin with an overview of the objectives, followed by information on understanding the data collection and assembly process. Then districts will move to using the TIA planning dashboard and learn how to import data into the analysis tool. Finally, once the data is uploaded into the dashboard, districts will be able to identify what skew exists in their historical data to better understand how to develop their local designation system. Key objectives for this session are identifying what historical data a district has access to and how to access it, learning how to use the TIA planning dashboard, and identifying what skew exists in the district's historical data. Throughout the TIA journey, districts will have access to several TIA-specific Excel analysis tools. In this recording, districts will be learning how to use the TIA planning dashboard to prepare for submission of the TIA application. Later, in a district's data capture year, a mid-year and post-year analysis tool can be utilized. There are three critical decisions that districts must make as they prepare to develop their local designation system. Who can earn a designation? How will the district designate? And how and when will the district compensate? This recording will focus on how will the district designate. There are three main components that go into determining a designation: district performance standards, system weights, and optional components or prerequisites. District performance standards are the specific teacher appraisal scores and student growth scores collected on each individual teacher. System weights are then used to determine the value of each teacher observation and student growth score. Finally, any additional optional components or optional prerequisites that a teacher must obtain to earn a designation. For TIA purposes, data is collected on both teacher observation and student growth to construct the data submission file that is submitted during the data validation process. Gathering historical teacher appraisal data is the first step in the data collection process. There are a couple of key questions that districts need to go through to identify the how and where of collecting this data. These questions are centered around three key concepts: what data is accessible, where is it located, and who has access. Now is a good time to establish and refine the PEIMS process and codes so that they are capturing the teachers appropriately as it relates to TIA. Once a district has gained access to teacher appraisal data, the next step is preparing the data for submission to the teacher incentive allotment. Here's an example. A district utilizing t-tests will need to gather only domains 2 and 3 of t-tests, since those are the only two domains used for submission to the teacher incentive allotment. If your district is using another appraisal rubric, please reference the materials found on our website in regards to the crosswalks for alternate teacher appraisal rubrics. An important step of the preparation process may involve converting the text descriptors of an appraisal rubric to its numerical equivalent. This step is important as a district will need to determine an average score for individual teachers. Gathering historical student growth data is the second step in the data collection process. There are a couple of key questions that districts need to go through to identify the how and where of collecting this data. These questions are centered around three key concepts: what data is accessible, where is it located, and who has access. The key difference in collecting student growth data versus appraisal data is that the source of the data may come from different places, depending on what type of growth measure and/or assessment is being used. Make sure the data you are compiling for both teacher observation and student growth are from the same year. That way you can make connections between the two data pieces. Once the district has collected and cleaned the historical data, it's time to assemble the data. There are 4 different levels of implementation as it relates to assembling data for the teacher incentive allotment. The first level is manually typing in data. This method is typically implemented in smaller districts, as this method becomes more and more difficult the larger the data set becomes. Pitfalls that are encountered using this method center around data entry errors, as manually typing in information poses this problem. The second level of implementation uses a copy-paste method to bring data over from the various places that the data came from. Pitfalls that are encountered involve alignment issues as the data is assembled. The third level of implementation is using indexing or VLOOKUP. This method uses a program like Excel to link data from different sources. Pitfalls that may be experienced are caused when creating formulas for this work in Excel. Lastly, the fourth level of implementation is centered around creating database connections to the various data sources. This provides the highest degree of fidelity as the information is being pulled directly from the source. This method, however, requires in-depth knowledge of databases and data management systems. Now it is time to assemble the data for the purposes of this training. Data should be structured using the table shown on this slide, using whichever level of implementation a district currently utilizes. Please note that the more data a district is able to provide, the more analysis that can be conducted on the dataset. Once you have assembled your data, it is time to utilize the features of the TIA Planning Dashboard. Step 1 in the process is uploading the data into the tool. This table shows an example of what the data structure should look like once uploaded into the Planning Dashboard. Step 2 of the process is reviewing the data. Take note of the helpful things to consider in the table, as this will help ensure the ability of the tool functioning correctly. Step 3 of the process is to review the data dashboard. If an error is presented, check the Data Entry tab to confirm the data is assembled correctly. The final product will reveal graphs and tables with key analysis on your dataset. Now it is time to begin identifying strengths and weaknesses in the data itself. The first reflection begins at looking at the overall correlation of the dataset. This is an important part of the process, as correlation is the foundation of the strength of relationship between teacher observation and student growth scores. The stronger the relationship, the stronger the foundation of the dataset. This is also a great time to identify key outliers that may exist in the dataset that then could prompt a further deep dive into why those outliers exist. Correlation is one of the most important parts of the data validation process, and it is important for a district to focus on having strong correlated data for purposes of the teacher incentive allotment. For this sample dataset, this district is showing a strong positive correlation and would receive full marks during our data validation process on our correlation check. Please reference the data validation documentation found on our website for more information regarding the checks conducted during data validation. The second reflection that should be conducted is centered around looking at the teacher observation performance breakdown. The tables identify the top 5, 20, and 33% of teachers found in the dataset and compares them against the statewide cut points for teachers across the state. This allows districts to identify how close or far off their teachers' performance is from the rest of the state. A district should self-reflect on where they should be based on a consideration of how their own performance is compared to the state. Things to consider are overall accountability, star performance, etc. For this district's dataset, there appears to be slight inflation on the student growth side. A good next step would be to identify a root cause to this inflation. The graph allows a district to identify if skew exists in either teacher observation or student growth. If these graphs are greatly shifted to the right or to the left, it would signal that inflated scores exist. In this sample district's dataset, the distribution looks very strong and creates a good bell curve that is expected for this type of dataset. TIA weights on the system application play a critical role in district success of a local designation system. It is vital for a district to consider their approach to weights as it relates to designation decision making. Best practice for determining weights starts with stakeholder engagement and moves to self-reflection on the validity and reliability of each component. Districts can then determine what weights should be set on their TIA application. Here is an example of what that process could look like. Start with stakeholder engagement, then move through pressure testing your component data. The planning dashboard can be a great resource to do this work. Then adjust weights as needed. Know that there is not a perfect science to establishing weights, and that there are a variety of weighting systems that have been established across the state. Some next steps following this training. Districts should practice this process with historical data and dive deeper into the data. If issues or outliers are discovered, run a root cause analysis to discover what the issue stems from. For districts that have multiple teacher categories across multiple growth measures, be sure to separate the data so that you can identify what should be done for each teacher category. Finally, the district's final TIA application is due Monday, April 15th. Thank you for watching this training on looking for skew in historical data. Please email the inbox at tia@tea.texas.gov if you have any questions about the content of this training.